Hello and welcome to ILTV's Elections Arena. I'm Aaron Porras, and today in the ring, Blue and White Chairman Benny Gantz presses forwards with his coalition negotiations while conflicts in security and religion and state divide the country. But first, today I'm joined by none other than the founder of the Front for the Protection of Democracy, Uri Zaki, and on the other side, political strategist and director of English operations for the New Right Party, or Hayamina Hadash, Jeremy Saltan. Now, gentlemen, first of all, thank you so much for coming in today.
Of course.
But let's move on to our first topic. Now, there's just 2 weeks left in Blue and White Chairman Benny Gantz's mandate to form a coalition, and he's been hitting a lot of speed bumps. But with the prospects of a third election looming overhead, it seems that the solid block of right-wing and religious parties is finally starting to crack. The Haredi Shas party leader, Aryeh Deri, even just suggested a direct election for the premiership between Gantz and Netanyahu. So for my first question, then, I'll turn to you, Uri. Why do you think it failed? Why was that shut down so quickly?
The negotiations or the
No, Deri's idea.
First of all, I'm not sure it's shut down already. I mean...
well, Netanyahu said, I'm not going for it, and then the right-wing bloc released a statement afterwards saying, we're going back to our previous statement.
It was, I think, if it has any chance, it has to come with a consensus between Netanyahu and Gantz. The reason Netanyahu declared he's not supporting it is because he needs to maintain the bloc under any circumstances. Netanyahu's cling to power is not only from a political reason, but his own struggle to remain in liberty, right? To remain out of jail. And he knows he has to be prime minister. If Deri opens the door for an alternative prime minister, no rotation, nothing there, because if it will be Gantz and Netanyahu and Gantz wins, and he has a good chance of winning because there's fatigue in the right-wing camp, then that means Netanyahu, after, I don't know when the election is going to take place, March, then Netanyahu is over, he's not the prime minister. Today, he still has a chance, either on a rotation or another elections, the way he sees it, to stay in power. And that's why Netanyahu would not go for it.
Jeremy?
Well, first of all, Netanyahu did not rule it out. He said he's not promoting it. And when it comes to Netanyahu, it's always important to look at the exact wording that he uses.
I agree.
Look, this is a creative solution. There are many solutions. If I'm Gantz, I actually don't take this deal. There was a poll that did come out about a week ago where they asked if there was a straight-up vote for prime minister, who would you choose? And Netanyahu had a 10-point lead. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Gantz is trying not to comment on this and hoping that this sort of goes through the news cycle. Of course, look, this is Gantz's time right now to form a coalition. The mandate is in his hands, yet similar to what we had when Netanyahu had the mandate, the one who is driving the news cycle is Netanyahu and the right. Well, Gantz has not had any meetings this week. There are no meetings set up for the next 2 weeks. It's almost like he's just waiting till the last minute.
Then do you think he's going to be successful at all, or is he going to have to give up the mandate?
I think that he's not going to be successful. There are stuff that he can do in order to actually be successful. He has to take the 3 no's, and he has to at least decide yes to one of them. The first no is no to Netanyahu. He's saying yes to Likud, but no to Netanyahu. That's a very difficult position to have. Just as Netanyahu can't decide who the leader of Blue and White is, Blue and White cannot decide who the leader of Likud is. That's just the way that it is. In terms of the second no, they say no to the Haredim. Well, if you're going to say no to the ultra-Orthodox parties, you're allowed to say that, but that's not going to help you go ahead and form a government. And the third no is they're saying no to the settlers. They don't want to see the right wing in a coalition with them as well, in terms of the Blue and White camp and their block of 44. So, look, if you're going to go ahead and stay with all 3 of those no's, you are not going to form a government. You're going to finish your 28 days, and it's going to then go to the knesset.
So do you agree that he has to kind of bend on at least one of these issues in order to form a government to be successful?
Well,
or can
depends
he do
if you
it
accept
without?
that notion that it's on Gantz's side of the table.
Well, right now it is.
It is right now, and it was on Netanyahu's side, and he failed twice already in the last year to form a coalition. The problem is that the Knesset is divided in such a way, and Netanyahu insists on having the bloc together. I think the real, you take outside politics, I'm not a big fan of a unity government, or, I would rather have a left-wing government. But the only feasible government in this Knesset with those results that has a chance, because Lieberman is the holding the balance between the two blocks, is a unity government between the two big parties, that is blue and white and the Likud party. Now, Netanyahu comes to the table with the bloc. I must say, I must salute even the leader of Jeremy's party, Naftali Bennett, or the co-leader, who said, Netanyahu, you don't have to. If I'll stay in opposition, that's fine. A unity government is more important than the bloc. The problem is that nobody else in the bloc is saying that, and Netanyahu insists on the bloc. When we talk about the bloc, what is the bloc? The Likud party itself is 32 seats, but Netanyahu brings along to a negotiation of two parties 55. You can't. It's not a unity government if you're talking about 55 vis-a-vis 33. It has to be 33 and 32. And that can be the basis of a unity government. As long as Netanyahu insists on that bloc, and as long as the bloc itself stays and says, under any condition, it has to be either with the whole of us or none of us, then there won't be a government.
Do you think that this will result in third elections or a third mandate given to a yet unknown person?
I think that I think that's one of the reasons that Netanyahu was not embracing Deri's idea. I think that there is very low readiness in the Knesset to go to a third round because of not personal, but political interest of the different parties who understand that most of them would lose in a third election.
Do you agree that the right wing would maybe take a big hit? As many polls have actually kind of said that they believe the right wing would be hit pretty hard in the third election.
We've had 3 public polls released that talk about a possible third election. And again, God help us if we do end up in that scenario.
There are all sorts of issues with that.
Okay, there are a lot of issues, and we can talk about them perhaps another time. But, I've seen these polls. I've seen also private polls that have not been released. Look, overall, you're going to have some people who lose out, but you're not going to have such a different picture. If we look at the fact that there's only 8 new Knesset members. In this Knesset, there are 9 returning Knesset members, which means, again, we went to elections twice this year to switch out less than 20 MKs. So I don't think we're going to have a big turnover if we do go ahead and go to another election. But what is important here is to form a government. And I just keep hearing this situation where there's a problem with the block of 55. Yes, it's true. Naftali Bennett said that if he is the obstacle, that he's willing to go ahead and remove himself in order to make sure that we have a government. But what Gantz is trying to do here is rewrite history. Because the last time we had a real national unity government, which was the last time we had a full term in Israel in terms of a Knesset from 1984 to 1988, both Peres and Shamir came with their satellite parties into a national unity government together. So again, Gantz can, if he choose, rewrite the history books. But if you go ahead and you actually go ahead and you read, Jeremy, that is Jeremy, the recipe.
It's not true about the 84 government. No, it's important. It's an important point.
Omitz and Shinui came in with Peres.
They came in after.
And you had the religious parties coming in
Gantz
with...
is not saying he's not willing to accept any other parties in the bloc. He's saying that let's first sit together, Likud and Blue and White, which was the case in 84 and, by the way, in 88 till 90, when the two big parties, they formulated together the basic principles of the government, and then said whoever accepts those lines should join us. That's what Gantz is...
So again, if you talk to the people who were involved in the 84 negotiations,
I worked for one of them.
So again, they will tell you that they were always in contact with the other parties within their bloc.
But they didn't give him the veto right, and it wasn't a veto then. It's not true.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to move on. We'll see how Gantz fares.
Yeah, we'll have at least, 50 days more to discuss? No, 40 days.
Like yeah. two more weeks, hopefully, and then the
extra 21 days.
And then 14 days after someone gets it.
This is depressing math. I hope not. But moving on to our next topic. In the days since the latest rocket attack on southern Israel from Gaza, Qatari envoy to the Strip, Mohammed al-Ahmadi, is now announcing that his nation will have difficulties continuing its financing of the Hamas-led enclave. Since 2012, Qatar is estimated to have spent over $1 billion on the Strip. Though, to keep the money coming, Hamas says that they will try to appeal the decision now, warning also that the deficit could lead to an explosion with Israel. And at a rally on Monday, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar even waved around a gun and threatened to turn Israel's cities into ghost towns. So I'll start with you, Jeremy, this time. Why isn't Israel, doing more to answer the calls from Sderot from the south, or even from
Yes.
Gantz and the opposition. Why isn't Israel conducting a more thorough operation?
So it's a very important question. Right now, we have a lot of challenges on our northern border. Okay, you can just see how many people are right now in the streets of Beirut protesting the government over there. Syria is a complete mess. We also have to deal with the new reality with the U.S. exit from the Syrian stage. We have additional issues coming up in Iraq that we did not have previously. Of course, Iran is going ahead and doing a lot of things. We have issues right now, of course, with the proxy war with Yemen, where it looks like Iran is making a lot of ground compared to where they've been in previous months. So with all of that happening right now, you look at what's going on with Gaza, and that is not the main strategic threat that Israel is dealing with.
Do you think it's a diversion, the attacks in Gaza?
So again, when you're Iran and you have all these proxies, you have the ability to go ahead and challenge Israel from a bunch of different sides. And Gaza, for the most part, has been a humanitarian issue. And I understand that they're trying to go ahead and try to create a political issue out of their humanitarian issue. But right now, it's really a humanitarian issue. Other than the blockade, which Hamas is trying to remove, there is absolutely nothing more that they can ask from the Israeli government. We've gone back to the original borders. There are absolutely no soldiers and no settlements in there. So you have a situation where they have internal issues. They're trying to go ahead and find a scapegoat. They're finding Israel as that scapegoat. They're getting more money, whether it's from Qatar or from Iran.
But Israel pulled out unilaterally from Gaza in
Yes.
2005.
Correct.
It's now 14 years later, and the citizens of Sderot in the south are complaining of constant threat of attack.
Yes.
And so, we're talking about now how the ground has shifted maybe beneath us in the neighboring countries, but this has been an issue for 14 years now. So the question is begged, why hasn't anything been done so far, Uri?
I think it's a combination. First of all, a bad but perhaps predictable political choice in Gaza that turned into a military coup of the Hamas taking over, and the Hamas, has an interest to divide Gaza at the moment to maintain its own control over Gaza.
So you're saying we shouldn't have pulled out in the first place, but now
No, I did not say
Well,
that.
I'm happy
I did not
to
say
hear that
that.
if that's what
But
what
we
you're
said in
saying.
real time that the best way to evacuate and to pull back from Gaza would have been with an agreement with the Palestinian Authority, something that hasn't been done, and we see the results later. But that's ancient history now. What needs to be done, and we can't run away from it, is two things. First, we need to understand there is no military solution to the Gaza problem. Netanyahu understands that. Netanyahu, I should say, on his behalf, he's not willing to, bring ground forces into Gaza to reconquer Gaza, whatever. He understands that that's a path with no end to it. But what he's not doing, and I think it's because of political reasons, is to have a political agreement that would include Gaza. Perhaps in the first part of it would be to have a humanitarian
But how
relief.
can you do that when Gaza is run by Hamas, an internationally recognized terror organization? How can
Netanyahu is negotiating with Hamas all the time. He allowed the Qatari money
but
there.
To give them official status like that.
No, not to give any official status. What you need to enable politically is to have the Palestinian Authority coming back there. But what you need to do at the moment is to lift the blockade for any goods that are not security threatening the state of Israel.
And how would you know that without a blockade?
I'm not saying that you shouldn't have control. You shouldn't have.
So how can you have control without a blockade?
No, but a blockade is blocking.
Exactly.
Control is saying this is okay. This is okay. Something that a rocket can't get in. Anything else can get in.
So
and right now it's not the situation.
How are you going to do
Neither, by
that?
the way, by the Egyptians nor by Israel.
So again, a blockade is one way to do that. What is the alternative?
There's a difference
way?
between we don't have a blockade over Egypt. When we exchange goods, we check what the goods are.
We have a peace deal with Egypt.
Okay, it doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that the blockade.
I think it does matter.
It doesn't matter because when you have this humanitarian crisis that you talked about,
yes.
you can't detach it from the political situation. You can't detach it from the security situation.
You can detach it. If you don't detach it, you're not going to be able to resolve it.
There won't be a situation where there be suffering in Gaza and there won't be suffering in Sderot, unfortunately, because they're adjacent, they're so close, and in Gaza you have the Hamas government there in order to sometimes, shift the public. I don't know, complaints instead of directing to them. It's easier to make it to Israel.
The situation we have right now in the South, again, is very difficult for the residents of the South. And as I said, beforehand, yes, there are some macro issues we're dealing with. But if you live in Sderot, it doesn't help to hear that answer. There is a way to deal with Gaza. However, unfortunately, the timing is not right now.
Why?
The best time to go ahead and
what is the solution?
Forget
the timing. Forget the timing.
You guys are in power for 10 years.
I'll go ahead and we'll put the timing to the side, and we'll talk about what the solution is. The solution is on our terms when we choose to take the initiative and not as a responsive action. We have to go into Gaza.
But you're saying that the response is military.
We do need to have a military option in which we go ahead and deal with the problem we have right now in Gaza. To do so, that probably means preemptively going ahead and taking all of the people who live in the Sderot and Gaza periphery and move them out.
It's unbelievable, these hawkish, you come
even
in the
Gantz is
studio.
I'm saying the timing is not right now,
and if
but
you will do it, it will be a major mistake.
Eventually, you're going to have
the targeted assassinations as well.
Netanyahu, the king of the right, that they are blocking together with him. They say, not under any circumstance, we won't go with anyone else. He's been the prime minister for 10 years. His party is part of this coalition for, 8 years now, almost 8 years, 7 years. And they're not doing that.
Targeted assassinations you're also against?
They're not doing it. It's not me.
I'm not saying.
And by the way, the military under Gantz didn't do it as well.
But Gantz is right now calling to return to that policy. Do you
Gantz is
agree or
also
disagree
a
with
politician, and he's saying things that would be nice to the ears of Jeremy Sultan. But Jeremy Sultan is representing a party that is part of this coalition for the last 10 years who hasn't done this. And why? Why didn't Bibi the hawk do that? Because it's not a viable solution. It would not
the
end.
timing. The
he was
timing
dragged
is not
into
right.
by the leader of his party. He was dragged into an operation in Gaza that didn't help him at all, didn't change the situation at all.
So you're saying that we should not have gone after the terror tunnels?
I'm not saying anything. What I'm saying is...
We lost Israeli
I'm not
lives
saying
because
anything.
we did
I
not
look
listen
at what
enough to
your
Taliban,
government
and we
is
did not
doing.
do it beforehand.
But why aren't you doing that?
So again, the timing is not right.
When is it right?
You need to have a timing in
Tell
which
that to Sderot's people.
Look,
when is the time?
Again, the threat that Gaza...
You can't attack me for your own policies. It doesn't make any sense.
You don't understand the policy. If you're going to say that
I don't
Gaza
understand the policy.
is at the same level as Iran, I mean, Iran is a much bigger threat to Israel than Gaza. Yes, Gaza can go ahead and
that's
put us
your
in the
new
bomb
excuse now?
shelters. There is a very big difference between just putting us in the bomb shelters and having the actual threat of Iran.
So when will the Iran threat end?
And hitting us.
So you tell Sderot's people to wait till the Iran threat is
I am saying there is a solution, but we can't do it right now.
All right,
I think it's just, I'm sorry, demagoguery. It's not a real... If you really support in what you say, then go ahead and do it.
So again, you need to do it when it makes sense.
All right, now we're going to have to unfortunately move on to our third topic.
Sure.
I know we can talk about this endlessly, but unfortunately we do have to move on. So the economy ministry secretly amended its regulations recently in a move that seems to target only the secular and non-Jewish, but basically the ban on importing non-kosher meats has now been extended to include pork and lard products by conditioning their imports on a kosher seal of approval, which, by the way, by definition is impossible. So, first question, why? Why is this happening? Uli, would you like to start us off? Why go after pork products in this weird secret move?
First, I would say that I wish that all of us would stop eating meat. I stopped eating meat. In general, it would be better for the environment, for the animals, for everyone. But unfortunately, it's not the situation. Why? I don't know why, by the way. I think it's a mistake by this government. I think that anything that is being done by coercion, and I'm a person of faith, I never ate pork, even when I used to eat meat. But having said all that, everything that is done through coercion is a mistake. I think that blocking public transportation on Shabbats, on Saturdays, making only Orthodox weddings and divorce as legal in Israel, and also the coercing kosher legislation, both on import or on domestic consumption. That's a mistake, and especially right now when you see how much this card plays. If I were the religious parties, the minute Gantz, when he had the advantage over Netanyahu, it's when he started talking about a secular government. People here are fed up of coercion. And by the way, not only seculars, even many people within the right, Orthodox
anyone who
camp,
isn't Haredi.
right, understand that this is a mistake, that any person should have their own choice. And, Brit is not part of our legislation. Almost 98% of the Israelis have Brit. Yom Kippur, no law that prevents driving on Yom Kippur. Nobody almost drives on Yom Kippur. When you don't have legislation, then people respect the religion much more.
So, look, we in Israel define ourselves as a Jewish and democratic state. There's an internal debate what that means. When it comes to religion and state issues, that's when it gets the most complicated. What we have done over the last 70-something years since we founded the country is to follow a set of rules known as the status quo. I think that any movement that is made by either side, any move that is coercive one way or the other, is something that's problematic. I do agree you need to have dialogue if you want to go ahead and make changes. In terms of the pork, there is an existing law called the pork law. And what they're trying to do here, yes. So
by the way, by the Rabin government.
But pork,
I can explain it on
seafood
government.
products were given an exemption.
So again, I can explain it on a legislative level if you want, on a philosophical level, whatever level you want me to explain it on. Obviously, when we're talking about internal raising and stock of pigs,
which is also heavily regulated and limited.
Of course it is, but I'm saying that this obviously does not deal with that particular issue. In general, putting all kosher or not kosher aside and all food aside, I think in general we need to really re-examine a lot of our laws when it comes to importing and exporting. I think that one of the great things that Naftali Bennett did as economy minister was to deregulate a lot of these things, such as eliminating a third of the standards in the National Standards Institute to make it easier. And what it ends up doing is ends up lowering the cost of living here in this country when you're able to go ahead and do those issues. So again, in terms of what's happening here with the pork, the best answer that I heard, although no one will confirm it, is that right now there are talks between the government and Lieberman, and obviously this move hurts Lieberman's base in a lot of ways, so it could be that's why this decision was made at this time.
It energizes the base, actually.
So if it does, we'll find ourselves in another election.
Whatever the case, yeah, we're going to find out very soon, I'm sure. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have in the elections arena this week. I'd like to thank Jeremy Saltan and Uri Zaki for joining us, and thank you to all of you, of course, for tuning in. Also, remember to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. See you next time.